T muted.
Don, you're muted. Are we live?
Great. Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. We have a quorum, and if we could have Judy do the roll call.
Indeed. Stiles.
Here.
Amend.
Here.
Thank you. Green.
Here.
Thank you. Curlis.
Here.
Zaremski.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Also present is, I'm sorry, Planning and Zoning Administrator Denise Swinger, and I do not see the village solicitor, Brianne Parcels.
I'm here.
Oh, great. Thank you. Brianne Parcels is present.
And village manager.
Oh, I'm sorry, Village Manager Josue Salmeron.
Okay. Just to quickly review the agenda, we have two communications. We'll have a place for citizens' comments, and that's for anything that is not, that we're not going to have a public hearing about. We'll have a public hearing for the conditional use, and then we will also have public hearings for the amendments. So we'll go on and review the minutes, and I thought we would just look at them. And does anybody have any changes? If they'll say the page they have a change, and we'll look at it if you have any proposed changes.
Judy, did you get the one that I sent to you, or?
I did. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other changes? If not, could we get a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
And I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, then we'll move on to communications. We have a letter from Tom and Holly Underwood regarding complaints about the adjacent transient guest lodging. I don't know if there's any comments on that. If not, we'll move on. And
Susan, I have questions, but do we do that now or later?
questions about that particular?
Yes.
Sure, go ahead now.
The question, Denise, what happens, we approve something and then somebody breaks the rules? What happens on your end?
And the rule that was broken here was?
Well,
You're muted.
it may have to do with parking, smoking, and then the noise after hours, but I'm not sure how late it was. I
think it was how many people too.
Yeah.
It was how many people.
Yeah. Do you follow up and ask those kind of questions?
Well, we don't have a stipulation on number of people.
That the fire code did. Maximum occupancy.
Yes, the maximum.
Yeah, but I don't know that those people were staying there. They were I think they were there visiting.
Well, I do think it
They
says
left in the
that 5
morning.
people stayed the night.
Sorry?
The letter says that at least 5 stayed the night.
So the occupancy that we were given for that property, actually, I think that was actually the other one. I don't know that we have that.
So what mechanism do we have if anyone gives a complaint about the property, people renting them out and there being noise and everything? Did they not get approval the next time they go around to get, I guess, I don't know if it's a certificate, but when you do the internal review?
Well, that's such a brand new code. I haven't had that come up yet, and maybe Brianne can talk to that a little bit. But typically, what we would advise a person to do is to call the police department, file a noise complaint. If are they breaking anything else, we'll definitely can keep track of that, and that can be brought up at the next registration. I don't know, Brianne, if you have anything to weigh in on that. It's such a relatively new change to the code.
If someone is alleging that they are violating the terms of the conditional use permit, depending on the nature of the allegation, they would make a report to Denise or to the police department, who would report it to Denise. It would be subject to investigation and all due process rights the same way any other zoning violation would be. As far as when something's alleged, it would have to be investigated by village staff. And if village staff finds that there's a substantiated basis for the allegation, then they could be cited into mayor's court.
So then is this going to be followed up on in that manner?
I wasn't planning on following up on it because it didn't follow the rules that you're talking about. The smoking area, designated smoking area and such, wasn't a part of the regulations at the time this was rented out.
What about the fire code?
None of that
Maximum
follow-
occupancy.
I can follow up with the Miami Township Fire and Rescue, but it's entirely likely that she has an occupancy of at least 6 people because it's for the house. We
The
have
house, okay.
an individual who has authorization from Miami Township for 6 people. Also had received a complaint about that one, but the code states it follows the fire department.
Well, it actually says for occupancy, it's max applicable health department regulations, which really even the health department doesn't state the occupancy of a dwelling. I know at least for commercial, I'm assuming for residential, it's been Greene County building regulations that issues the occupancy permit. So it's a question, Raven, when I know Miami Township Fire and Rescue, when they do their inspection, they've put on there the occupancy, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So, but it's typically Greene County building regulations, and I want that to come up in text amendments tonight.
Well, one issue that you have is they were outside. I mean, that was part of the issue that the neighbors have a problem with. And they're outside because they're presumably respecting the no smoking in the house rule and presumably not wanting to crowd together indoors because at that time there were still some COVID restrictions. And so, I mean, we sort of looked at that letter and said, there's really nothing actionable here. I could have a party and have 40 people on my back deck, all of them smoking. Because the fire department doesn't, restrict what happens outside of your home when they're, looking at the fire code issues. So, I mean.
So if somebody could just write them back and say that we read your complaint and there's nothing actionable here, that'd be great.
Yeah, maybe giving an outline of, call the police so there's a documentation of the time.
I've done that.
Okay,
I mean, because
yeah.
I was getting emails back and forth all weekend.
That's what I'm worried about is if this is, because I've even had someone come up to me and ask what they should do if there's a problem about a different property. And I said, call the police. But I think having a good form saying if this is an issue, this is what it is. So you're not getting inundated by emails.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are any other questions, we do have another letter that came in, but we can deal with that under the public hearing for the conditional use applicant. So our next item is the council report. Laura, do you have a report?
Yeah, I'm just going to really quickly touch on some things that Planning Commission might be interested in. Tosway held a town hall, a week, 2 weeks ago on the DORA. And, one of the issues here in this small village is the way that legislation is written. You have to have 4 licenses in it. A small one might work here for 1 or 2 properties, and but it probably isn't going to work for here, although they work other places. And I don't know, that may not be the end of the tale, but I sense council doesn't have any interest in trying to create one. Just want to remind everyone, a couple of holidays coming up. Juneteenth, there's a couple events this Saturday, and then of course Pride the following Saturday. council did a first reading at the last meeting on establishing a building department and declaring an emergency to get that done. And not sure where that's going to go, but the public hearing on that will be at the Monday's council meeting. Also, June 21st, we have a first reading on the weeds ordinance that everyone worked on. And coming up July 6th and July 19th, we'll have readings on the annexation of 33.816 acres on the south of town, the Hyde Road and Spillane Road property that is going to be a new development. So thank you.
Susan, I would like to add a few things on the building department. One of the things that I've been working on is clearing up the language in our codified ordinances to gives us the ability to do building inspection and plan review. You may know that the village established a building department in 1976, so we have ordinances for that. But the language that is in our codified ordinances doesn't meet the new requirements for the state building standards. So we have to bring our ordinances up to the requirements of the state in order for us to have a building department. I find that it's essential for us to have our building department and be certified department so that it levels the relationship that we have in outsourcing and contracting plan review and inspections. This is a authority that we have as a municipality. In our current mode of operating, we've just given that over to the county. They take all the fees and they do what they do. We as a municipality have the authority to have our own building department. And I think at a minimum, we need to exercise our authority to have a certified building department. And if we want Greene County to continue doing this service for us, then we can have that, but the relationship changes. We would then be seen as a customer because they're doing that work on our behalf for our residents and business entities. So Council, Laura pointed out correctly, Council had a first hearing and declaring emergency on establishing a building department. There are two pieces of legislation that will be coming to Council next week, and that is to seek certification for residential building and non-residential building and plan review and inspections. So that's the next step in becoming a certified building department. Our goal is to improve the permitting process in the village that it helps us deliver on economic development activities. I've heard numerous stories of challenges that our entrepreneurs and the property owners have to deal with at the county level. We want to make that a smoother process to ensure that our residents are properly served and we have right mechanisms for effective economic development. I have two other announcements, big news. We have been awarded a grant money to reroute the storm system along Dayton Street. So that's been a problem since the 1960s. We have secure funding for that. So we'll be working the next couple months to engineer and design that storm system, rerouting that storm system.
That's great news.
Denise, did I miss anything? We'll have more news.
You said you had two more announcements. Was there a second thing?
I have the other one, but I realized it's about broadband. We're going to have big news about broadband, another grant-related activity, but I'm so eager to get the news out, but I don't have all the, I have the information. I just need to vet it with all my partners. But by the time that this meeting comes around, the news will be out that we have grant money for broadband expansion and whatnot. More details to come. So be on the lookout for that.
Great.
And I did neglect to point out that the council appointed Matthew Raska to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anything else under council report? Okay, the next area is citizens' comments for anything that we're not going to be discussing. Is there anybody who would like to make any citizens' comments? Okay, then we will move on to the conditional use application. Denise, would you like to talk about it?
Sure. This is for a garage and an accessory dwelling unit on the second floor. at 213 North Winter Street. Alex Melamede of Access Architecture is he actually is the one that made the application on behalf of Tracy and Johnny Cooley, who are present tonight as well. This property has two frontages, both on North Winter Street and Cliff Street. So they're subject to a 20-foot setback on both North Winter and Cliff Street. The rear yard setback is actually to the rear of what faces North Winter. So that has a 10-foot requirement and a 5-foot requirement along the side yard, which is between the property at 213 and then the property on North Winter Street, which I believe is like 211 or 209. I'm not sure. That would be considered the side yard. We did get a letter from that next door neighbor. He had a concern over where the property line was, and everyone received that letter, so we can talk about that as well. The plan is to demo the existing garage, which has a access driveway off of North Winter Street. They would then abandon that driveway and instead have the driveway coming off of Cliff Street. Because there isn't enough of a setback for 20 feet from the property line, one of the requests that staff has is that if it is approved tonight, that they are required to go for a variance to that setback. I did have Johnny Burns go out to the site because of that project that Josue just mentioned. He is suggesting because of the stormwater and there's actually it's going to be routed and down Cliff Street, North Winter down to Cliff, that if this is approved, that the driveway be a temporary driveway until they complete that storm system project. Right now, it is a swale for water, but eventually it's going to be piped and it will be filled in with dirt. That is a culvert right now. So I think that's about it. I mean, the accessory dwelling unit, everything meets the size requirement based on the primary dwelling. But again, even though there is like 30 some feet from the edge of the road, they only have a little bit over like 11 feet of property from the property line. So it will require, if you approve it, it's going to require a variance on that. I think that's pretty much it for me.
Denise, do the people live there at the property? Because I noticed on the application, the mailing address was different than the property address.
Well, it's the primary dwelling is not livable either right now. So they're rehabbing that. They're rehabbing the primary dwelling. And yes, their intention is to live in the primary dwelling.
Can I chime in?
Hang on, Alex. Let me just see if anybody else has any questions for me, and then we'll go to you.
Other questions for Denise?
What are they planning to do with the unit once it's complete?
It's not, if you're asking if it's planned for a transient guest lodging, it's not.
Okay.
It'll be long-term use.
And the long-term use is they're planning on living there.
No, they're planning on having a relative live there.
Okay. Okay, but they are applying for a transient guest lodging
No, they're
for the accessory dwelling? They're not?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
It's a garage with an ADU above.
Okay. Okay.
And Alex is here if he wants to expand on the.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say the Coolies lost their house in the tornadoes, and they've been rehabbing the front house, totally gutted it. So they're doing a lot of the work themselves, and they could live in the ADU while they finish the main dwelling, and later have their son live in the ADU. So there's no TGL plans at this time.
Any questions for Alex?
Alex, how big would it be a big deal for you to redesign it to move the balcony to the east?
A big deal is always relative. That there's design time involved, so that's a professional service. So that the Coolies might be upset if they had to do that. This is, I guess, regarding privacy to the yard to the south, and an east balcony. Oh, an east balcony would face the alley or the woods.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be a pretty major redesign, just the way plumbing and the roof line intersect.
Could it just be facing north?
Yeah.
North, looking over the street.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not the way it's drawn now. I mean,
Obviously.
it's
Can't just turn it
everything
around.
would change. That's a bedroom, so you couldn't enjoy that balcony and the oak tree that's in the neighbor's yard from the community space, or the kitchen area. And so if we did take away the balcony, there would be windows there, which would be, the view would be equivalent.
I mean,
Right.
we did receive a letter from the neighbor. I mean, I don't think they didn't have an issue with windows. I think they had more of an issue with the balcony.
Yeah, that's how I read it too. Although it is kind of a bummer when you have a privacy fence and then somebody can look right over it. It's kind of defeats the purpose of why you spent the money to do that.
Yeah, that's a difficult situation. So I'm advocating for my clients and the design interests that they have on their property, and they definitely have stated that they want to work with the neighbor and have.
Excuse me, Alex.
Johnny, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. It's good to see everybody. Can you bring up the drawing that shows that deck is recessed, that it's not extending from the face of the building?
Yeah, that you can see that in the plan. If Denise, you could do that.
Yeah, I don't think that is the concern.
Okay.
The concern is just somebody sitting out there. I mean, I guess, they use their backyard a lot. And I mean, and this is what we call conditional use hearing. So,
Okay.
the condition of approval might be to reconsider either having the balcony facing another direction or not have it at all, as a way to appease, the neighbors.
Well, my feeling on this issue would be that for the same reason people don't put decks on the front of their house, they want that privacy. I don't see that structure. That structure is built 65 feet back off our east of our house, so it sets well back on the lot.
That's not what the neighbor, you only have to have a 5-foot setback from your property line. And so, I mean, it's directly would be looking into the neighbor's backyard.
Denise, do you have the neighbor's letter? Because there was the diagram in that.
And I'm wondering if we should discuss the neighbor's letter at the public hearing.
Sure.
So that we can let them discuss it.
Okay.
Yeah, because just a reference, we had probably about an hour and a half conversation with John, our neighbor, His wife, Melanie, they seem to be really good neighbors. So our architect was present during this, and we went over these issues. I know what his issues are. His issues are basically, he's concerned with line of sight. So it needs to be recognized that our houses are 20 feet apart from one another. Our south exposure, our windows, face his north windows. From my bedroom window, I can see over into his backyard, into his hot tub area. We do have some pictures if you'd like to see those.
So we have the same, hi, my name's Tracy. I'm Tracy Foley. So what we're saying is we have the same line of sight through our current windows in the home on the second story that we would from the ADU.
And we can present those photographs.
Yeah, I guess in a conversation that I had with the next door neighbor, I think the
Sure.
concern is too that, you know, this could in the future be used as a transit guest lodging if you ever came or a future homeowner came asking for a transit guest lodging, and it just the privacy issue with various people, you know, in that ADU. If they're present tonight, I mean, Susan, that's, you know, you can call on them if they're
Sure. Well, why don't we go ahead, if it's okay, and open the public hearing so we can hear from the neighbors?
Sure.
Actually, I have one question first, as we're talking about line of view. So it seems like the issue is from the porch, the line of view to the yard. This is in the accessory building. The line of view to the yard, not necessarily the line of view to their house. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's from the proposed balcony to the
So
backyard.
their concern is in privacy for them in their house relative to the person in the accessory. It's the privacy for them sitting back in their yard.
Hi there.
Okay.
Hi there. Can I speak, please? My name is Melanie Ricketts.
Well, hang on, you have to be recognized.
Okay.
Melanie, go ahead. And state your name.
I'm sorry. That was the point that we were making. It's the exact same line of sight that we currently have from the second story of our home in the back.
I would disagree with that. It is a different line of sight from the accessory building. And it would provide a line of sight to our house, to the back of our house, including our windows.
I think, so everyone can be clear on this, let us bring up some pictures that I took last week after we met with John. And then everybody can get a better understanding of what we're dealing with.
I need permission to share my screen, please.
Should be able to do that now.
Okay, thank you so much.
Can anybody hear me?
Let's go to the 2 at the rear of the property, number 5.
Number 5.
Whoever that was, yes, we can hear you.
So these are our house is on the right and John and Melanie's is on the left. This is taken from the stake that is the far western ADU corner. So you can get some sort of, yes.
And you want the other one?
Yeah. Now we're going to shift to the east stake, the farthest east, number 7. Now, as you can see, the property to their south, the red mansard roof, they have a window that actually probably looks over into their yard. Now, I want to show one other picture from our second floor bedroom.
Which one?
Number 1, please. I don't know if this is an ADU or if it's a garage. I really don't know. But that 3x3 window appears to be within 10 to 15 feet from their existing hot tub. And that's more of a line of sight issue than our ADU would be. And then from our bedroom windows,
Which one is it right here?
that's the same one.
Sorry about that.
So the next pictures will be from our second floor south wall that faces their north wall. No,
That's this one.
yeah. So we're talking about removing that garage if we do the ADU. And you can see there's line of sight issues. The line of sight is pre-existing regardless of our ADU. It's there. When you have houses that are 20 feet apart, you're going to have those line of sight issues. We knew that when we bought the property in November. We don't have a problem with it. We're good neighbors. We're great neighbors. We lived in Beaver Creek for 33 years. We had the same neighbors for 33 years. We raised our family of 4 children. They had 4 children. There's not going to be an issue.
Judy, do we have the renderings from the neighbor?
I do not have that.
I can find it.
on
And
It's in the letter.
I have it. I have it open right now if you want me to share a screen.
Sarah, is that you? Yes.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're showing us about the line of sight, but I think there is a little difference between a window and a deck. I mean, because windows, even though you can be seen, decks tend to have lingering. People tend to want to sit out there, and so it's the amount of time that somebody would be there seems to be it would be more.
Along those lines, and with this view, roughly, how far in feet or whatever, how far is that deck from the back? How far would that deck be to the back of the neighbor's house, roughly?
Well, it's 65 feet between the back of our existing house to the proposed ADU, 65 feet. And then to the property line, Alex can speak to that.
Yeah, so the property line, I don't know if that is, the neighbor had said to me on the phone that was in question. But I guess a survey had been done, and Alex can speak to that. From the fence, that the neighbor said that isn't actually their property line, that their property line is more towards what cuts into part of the existing garage that's going to be demolished. But at any rate, that is considered the side yard. And so the accessory dwelling unit from the property line, wherever that is, and Alex can hopefully speak to that, it only has to be 5 feet from the roof edge. So
it sounds like that deck might actually be nearly 70 feet, the diagonal from that deck to the back of the house and of the neighbor's house, roughly.
Yes.
Okay. Just looking for context.
Am I sharing that image correctly, Judy?
yes, I mean, that's what I received.
Matthew Kirk has his hand raised.
Hey, sorry, I just kind of joined the call a little late. I've been listening, but I think the point that was made that deck and the idea of lingering is very relevant. I know I would have concerns about that. And I also want to kind of point out that I know we're talking about the distance in feet, but I mean, I've lived in a property with very similar size and dimensions. And if it's about privacy, that is definitely space that, you'll be able to hear each other, interact with each other. And I think the point that while right now this property is being used for probably somebody who'd be more of a permanent or long-term resident, the fact that our current laws support that it could be a transient guest lodging gives the neighbor, I think, very appropriate concern for pause that this particular project would encroach upon, I think, what would be a reasonable expectation of privacy in their backyard space.
I mean, I would have to agree that it's gonna substantially change the value of their property when just a little bit of compromise would be able to remediate this issue. I think it's important that we protect the investments of the current property owners as well as being understanding to the needs of new development. And by, asking you guys to maybe go back to the drawing table, find a compromise would really be the most prudent way to resolve, the existing versus the new construction.
If I could make a comment, if the concern is simply proximity and line of sight, I feel that that's relevant. If it is, but it might become a transient guest lodging, I don't know that that is relevant because that use would have to come back to Planning Commission, and I think you'd have a very good cause at that point to deny it. So you might want to separate those out.
I don't think. Yeah, thank you, Judy. I don't think it has anything to do with who's in it at any time. I think, that it is substantially changing. I mean, you can just see that even the view from their back patio, the current feel and use of their house, and that adding the additional visibility into their backyard from an additional party, not even just the party that's in the house, it is a substantial change to the current structure. And it could be easily compromised.
Can I ask John and Melanie, the house to their south, the red house, the building that overlooks their hot tub right now, that's within, it appears to be like 10 to 15 feet with a 3x3 window. What is that building? Do they know?
I don't think that they need to respond to that because we're talking about a new construction. Any site is an existing use, and I don't think it's relevant to the discussion.
Judy, can I chime in?
Sorry, that's Susan's call. Susan?
Yes. Identify yourself, please. We're in the public hearing part.
Yes, this is Ted Donnell. I'm the president of Axis Architecture. I would like to clarify something really quickly if we're asked to go back to the drawing board. If we come back to the table with an accessory structure in the backyard, but we add a deck to the main house that's on the second level that goes back into the yard another 20 feet, we're permitted to do that without any conditional uses by Planning Commission. So if, it seems to me that there's this double standard going on between what an accessory dwelling unit has compared to what a house has. And if we have to deal with the legalities of working within the setbacks, we can simply do that, but the result is not going to be favorable to the neighbor. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I mean, I think that with a new structure, especially in a tight neighborhood, it's important that the neighbors obviously have a good relationship, but it's also important for Planning and Zoning Commission to consider the existing properties and the existing uses and find a compromise between the two parties. And where it is afforded within the laws and the zoning code that we have to assist them in finding that compromise, I think it's extremely important that we do so. I think the biggest difference in this apartment is that's a second, household that's going to have view onto the property versus a single household. And when they purchase that property, when they have that use in that property, they've expected to have that view from that single household. And now we're adding a second. So I can understand that, they would like some compromise. I think it's reasonable that they, find some compromise. And taking a moment to consider that and even just flipping the apartment, whatever needs to happen, I think is important not only to the long-term relationship of those houses, but also important for us to consider as a planning and zoning commission.
I have another question. Is this ripe for decision because of is there really a property boundary issue?
Alex, can you address that?
The record on the GIS site, which usually catalogs surveys, is showing the plat from 1850 or whatever. So we don't have agreement on that because we believe that our lot is, on the edge of what we think is the right of way. And it's 50 feet wide and everybody's guaranteed their 50 feet. It appears to us that the lot line is where the fence is, or, within a few inches. And I don't have any reason to believe otherwise.
Was the 1928 plan of land village-wide? Would that shed any light? Wasn't the whole village replatted in 1928? I'm just asking.
I'm not sure of the date on that. The Oak Park expansion, that's, the north side of town over here.
Well, I mean, it seems like if we don't know if where the setback is to begin with and whether the building needs to be moved or you can build it at all, I mean, it just doesn't feel ripe for us to make a decision unless you know for sure.
Well, we'd like to build it closer to the street.
And then you need to go, even if we approve, you have to go get a variance anyway, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, I sure would like that balcony to be on the east.
Have you considered turning the whole structure if you don't want to redesign it? That might get you the driveway, the setback without having to get a variance on it.
Turning it
counterclockwise 90 degrees.
And then using the driveway from the front?
Yeah, so then you'd have a driveway with a right angle.
You'd have a driveway with a right angle. So, I mean, it's another 100 and some odd feet of driveway that, paving that, they don't want running through their yard.
No, it still could be from Cliff Street. It just would come in from Cliff Street, and then you'd have to take a left turn into the garage.
A left turn into the garage.
Hey, Alex,
a lot more
what
pavement.
we're looking at, excuse me, we have a 100-year-old magnolia tree that we've really taken a lot of concern with of saving that magnolia tree through our construction. And what worries me too is the public works project where they're going to be putting a storm pile down 12 foot below grade to see if that affects the magnolia. So that is one reason. And it's kind of hard. Denise has been out to the property. So, it's hard to explain these situations if you haven't been on the property of what the line of sight issues are. I don't think the deck is going to be intrusive at all. That deck will be used for coffee in the morning. That'll probably be the extent of that deck.
I think the big green alien in the purple box is a little bit more shocking than a nicely sided ADU is going to be, also, just in terms of characterization.
Yeah.
Could we hear?
If I can just throw out another idea, because there's a little bit of brainstorming going on here. As I look at it, the interesting thought that got brought up was that you need to get a variance anyway because of the setback. And if you, as long as you're at it, if you can, have more of a variance, move it another 5 feet towards Cliff Street, gives you a little more room in the back on the south side of the accessory building. And instead of a deck on the second floor, put a patio in on the ground floor and just a little staircase that leads down to it. And you could have a very nice elaborate patio on the ground floor, and the neighbor's privacy fence eliminates any line of sight issues, and you still have a nice space, and et cetera, et cetera. Just an idea. I thought I'd throw out.
Yeah,
We love the idea of
respectfully,
moving it closer to Cliff
that's
Street.
probably not an option.
Well, a stair equates to a deck in terms of privacy, I think. I like that idea. I really like the idea of moving the ADU to be, say, only 20 feet from the Cliff Street, so the zoning code in their, corner lot, double front yard scenario says the garage should be 20 feet off the road so that you can park the car in front of it. So, by the logic of that portion of the code, it would be nice for us to put this thing right on the lot line. But we felt like that might be too much of an ask. But if it helps the neighbor, and if BZA would be accommodating, and the Coolies are into it, then that'd be a great option for us.
Yeah. Could it be, I guess it would be parallel with the other garage from the property behind?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that would probably be a lot better for everyone concerned.
Yeah, we would like that.
That would
Is the
be
neighbor
agreeable to
present?
us.
Hi there, this is Melanie Ricketts. I'm the neighbor. My husband's also on the call, but I think he's having trouble with folks hearing him.
Melanie, what would you like to say before we close the public hearing?
Well, I think I'm still a concern with the property line. So I agree that I feel like it would be hard to make any decision without that understanding. And I think that even with it set back further from our property line, that we still would disagree with the second story deck facing our yard. We understand the appeal of it. We've put a lot of money. We have a beautiful tree. But we bought this house with this beautiful backyard for privacy, for raising a family. And we just don't feel comfortable with a deck, essentially, with the perfect view of our yard in the back of our house. And so we really appreciate any support or any accommodations to be made to move that deck. So thank you.
Okay, are we ready to close the public hearing? Okay, well, we will close the.
Well, I have another question. Would you, if it was moved back more towards Cliff, would you be able to build it out more with a privacy, I guess it would be fence sticking out of the unit to block line of sight to the rear of their property? So it's just going off an angle more towards the house on Walnut?
Yeah.
That's up to Alex. Alex
Does
would
that
have to
make any
address that.
Yeah, it does.
I'm sorry. So, I mean, the deck is already, covered, so it's kind of a telescoping view to the back of their yard. I mean, you kind of have to look around the roof that covers the deck to really get a good look of their.
I understand that, but if the compromise is, build that out a little bit with the structure, maybe not have it all roofed, just so that there could be a privacy fence kind of build up on that side, so there's not a line of sight going to the backyard. You still get the back angle, I guess it would be, of the rear of the property, but it wouldn't be as intrusive, especially if it's moved more towards Cliff.
Are you talking about an angle primarily?
Yeah, basically, so you build it out, put a carrot out sticking up from that deck, make sure you have a privacy fence kind of build up on the deck. You see them like in large apartment complexes or like in resorts. So they swing it out some, they build a privacy wall so you can't see the people behind where they are, and then you can see it angled out. You see it like in beach areas.
Yeah, I think that would defeat the purpose of the design. It would be a closing in, like build a wall in front of, the only opening out of the deck.
Well, it looks like it's already kind of squared in there anyway, so you would just build it out a little bit so they have a little bit more square footage out and then angle it over.
We're against the setback though. I mean, if we could, I think there's a lot of design avenues to go down before we
have a couple of hands up, but I do want to say, because of the idea of a zero lot line setback, I've texted Johnny Burns and asked him to participate in this because typically BZA is not going to do something greater than 50%, which this is right on the line of that. But I really want to know from Johnny Burns what that implication is with a zero lot line because of the potential for any future sidewalks or anything like that. So he's here.
Well, and Denise, the neighboring property owner has been trying to get on with his phone repeatedly. And he keeps trying, and then he's spoken over or whatever. So we should attempt to let him speak. You're now muted. Can you unmute?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is John.
Yes.
And John, I give you last name too.
Sorry, I'm Jonathan Ricketts, owner of 211 North Winter Street.
Okay.
Yeah, my views largely reflect what Melanie said in that, even having the property set back off the property line another 10 feet or so doesn't really improve what we're concerned with. And really, the whole idea of having the kind of angled fence, that did cross my mind, but I just think there are options available that, the owner can still get their deck and it just doesn't have to be overlooking our property. I tried to make that clear in the letter, and, we put some time and analysis into that just so we weren't just, blowing wind. So I appreciate everybody taking the time today to discuss this. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Johnny.
I'm here. I guess I'm about to get caught up on what's going on.
So Johnny, when we went out to that property on Cliff Street, you mentioned that there's going to be a stormwater project going in that culvert there. The code requires that there has to be from the property line 20 feet for the driveway, but you were okay with a variance to allow 10 feet from the property line because in total there's like 31 feet, and it would be 11 feet, but 31 feet from the edge of the pavement to where the dwelling would be sitting, the garage would be sitting. You were okay with that. But now it's being proposed to maybe have it be a zero lot line, which literally would take it down to like 21 feet to the edge of the building.
I'm not okay with that, not at this time, because we don't know what the storm project's going to impact going down through there. And we don't want to have to be dealing with a house going right that close to the property line.
Okay.
And Johnny, you've seen that the garage the next house down on Cliff Street is also almost right on the property line.
I did see that.
So it wouldn't be any closer to the property line than that other existing garage.
And until I get the final design for the storm, I don't want to make no decisions because I could impact myself. And that also has utilities on that easement as well to the left of that development. Between that garage that you're talking about and the new property. We have power line poles back there as well. And also, Denise, I don't know exactly where the sanitation is on that line. I know it's in that right-of-way area as well. So is the homeowner proposing a zero lot line, or is this something that the planning commission's proposing?
We're trying to find a compromise about the deck between looking over to the neighbor's property. So we're brainstorming, I guess.
This is Brianne, the solicitor. I would just remind Planning Commission that if you do impose conditions, that they have to specifically reference the grounds for the imposition of the condition based on the language of our code, either under 126203 or under 126204, as far as what specifically are you trying to accomplish with imposing these conditions. Generally speaking, when you're trying to avoid detriments, that's under 126203E. As far as the proposed use not involving uses, activities, processes, materials, equipment, and conditions, including but not limited to hours of operation that would be detrimental to any person's property or the general welfare by reason of excessive production of traffic, noise, smoke, fumes, glare, odor, or other characteristic which is not comparable to the uses which are actually permitted in the zoning district. So that's one thing for you all to keep in mind when you're brainstorming what conditions you might like to see imposed.
Brianne, could you repeat the first one you mentioned?
The 126203E specifically says if you're going to impose conditions that your proposed use will not involve uses, activities, processes, materials, equipment, or conditions of operations, including but not limited to hours of operation that would be detrimental to any person's property or the general welfare by reason of excessive production of traffic, noise, smoke, fumes, glare, odor, or other characteristic not comparable to the uses permitted in the zoning district. This is being presented as a residential use in a residential district.
So to kind of summarize what I'm hearing, Johnny is not in favor of a zero lot line, and the property owner at 211 doesn't have, the concern isn't the location of the ADU as much as it is the balcony or upstairs deck is what I'm hearing. So that even if it was set back to a zero lot line, it doesn't really satisfy the neighbor either. Am I summarizing that correctly?
Yes, this is Melanie Ricketts. Yes, you are. Thank you.
And was I correct in when no one's really sure where the lot lines are currently either? Is that correct?
Could someone address that, Alex, or the owners? Because the letter from the Ricketts seemed to indicate that there was a survey or something going on, but it wasn't completed.
The Greene County Auditor showed, the Greene County Auditor's site plan shows the lot line on the side, the south side, as the fence line. Alex has stated that that's probably accurate within 6 to 12 inches. But we have not had that professionally surveyed because we're in the planning stage right now. I'll get a surveyor out there if we get approval, and then we'll know for sure.
Okay.
when they lay out the footers.
So, okay, wait a minute. Because if you're going from the Greene County GIS, that's not really accurate.
Yeah, that's not accurate.
So do you know if there's property pins? Have you been able to locate any
I
property
have not located any pins.
on any of the properties nearby either? I mean,
No.
okay. So I guess my question is now, if you are going to go ahead and get a survey and you determine that actually they do have more of that property, you still have 50 feet beyond that. So I guess it isn't going to change. It may or may,
It
it
could
may
change
actually
the
reduce-
size of the building.
Yeah. I mean, it may,
It would change the size of the right of way, I guess.
Right, which means you may have to set the building back more, which to fit it in there, you may have to lose a foot or two. You don't know. You may gain a foot, who knows?
Yeah.
Alex, from the fence where you think the property line is to the edge of the furthest edge of the structure is how many feet?
From the property where I think the property line is to the edge of the structure is the 5-foot setback that you mentioned before.
It's 5 foot. It's not further than that.
Right. Well, that's the 1 foot overhang on the balcony. So the foundation would be another foot. Yeah. 6 feet.
So I guess what I'm saying is you're already at, you don't have any cushion there. So you're already at what you're allowed. And if you find out that that property line is actually off, then you're going to be asking for a greater variance.
Then, yeah, then the area between the side setbacks would scooch to the north.
Yeah. So, okay.
Hey, Denise, is it okay if I make a comment right now?
Sure. I think I'm going to.
Can anybody hear me?
Go ahead. Yes.
Go ahead. Yes. Yeah. So, I've just kind of mostly been listening in. And I think I think we're kind of coming full circle in some ways, in that the original idea was, how can we reconfigure the design so that the next door neighbor's yard and lot are not a primary sightline focus? And that's what their concern is. And it sounds like they have a very beautiful yard. So it would probably be nice from an architectural standpoint to put a nice deck out or window and look into their tree. And so I can appreciate the architectural design element of it, but I also think that it's reasonable as we have more ADUs coming through to, have the outdoor spaces be designed so that they're focused primarily into the lot where they're being built. And I think that's a reasonable request and sets a reasonable precedent for what we would kind of do moving forward. Because the reality is there are a lot of nice backyards in Yellow Springs, but people have done that with an expectation that it's kind of a little outdoor oasis that they're going to enjoy. So, I certainly get that. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, the way our setbacks are organized is that you pretty much have to build in the middle of your lot. So you have to look outward. And I'm not just going to only put west windows on a building, for example. I think that's, legislating where windows are allowed to go is beyond, kind of the scope.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that's,
Yeah.
I don't think I'm talking about windows, because the reality is, I think, as was mentioned earlier, people don't really linger in the window. When was the last time you just stood in your window and stared out of it for prolonged periods of time? Okay, well, I guess I don't have that kind of time on my hands. But nonetheless, I think that's different than a deck. I sit out on my deck, like you said, in the morning when you're having a coffee, or maybe in the evening you're grilling out or having an adult beverage or whatever. A deck is meant as an extension of your living space. And so I think it's reasonable to say we don't necessarily want someone's living space right on top in a bird's eye view of your living space. It's just a compromise we have to make as we do these to be considerate to our neighbors. And I thought the recommendation to make a lower level patio was very reasonable.
That would be setting a condition that we're not allowed to have a deck. I don't know if that's would be considered reasonable by all parties. I just want to note that we are, living in a village that is densifying, and we are going to have to learn how to get along with our neighbors and share our space and live on different levels. This is what it means to be buying a small lot in a village in order to have walkability so we can walk to downtown. That means we're all going to be living closer together. We're going to have to learn how to live with our neighbors and do our best to design to accommodate that. And I don't feel like we've designed a vulture's nest, that'll be just, invasion on the neighbors. Maybe I could try a stab at a rendering that is reasonable, that would be, help ease the tension here. But I also think, we want to build a deck on our properties. A small one on the second floor is not substantially different from a large window that we could open up on a second floor. I think that's a distinction without a difference.
Right. And this is Tracy, and I would just like to make the point that no matter where we put the deck, we're going to have line of sight into someone's yard. And even if the deck is facing the back of our property, we can still see into everyone's backyard. So I don't quite understand how we can legislate the placement of a deck. Thank you.
Okay, I think if there's not any other comments, I'm going to close the public hearing.
I have a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, hi.
And introduce yourself.
Yep, so my name is Kelsey Cooley. I'm obviously Johnny and Tracy's daughter. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in this forum. I actually live at 211 Gardendale Drive in Yellow Springs. I am an interested party to this matter since I am a resident of Yellow Springs and I will have a vested interest in this property. I invested in the renovation at my residence at 211 Gardendale Drive. That renovation won the 2021 Miami Valley Cody Award for the quality of work that was done. My father, who is a carpenter, built our family home, renovated a previous home of mine, and will be conducting the work on this project. And I can assure you, he will bring the same level of craftsmanship to that property as what I currently have at mine. The conditional use application for a garage with ADU meets the standards set forth in Chapter 126203 in the following ways. The proposed use will be consistent with the intent and purpose of this zoning code. The ADU will be used as a residence. The request seeks to comply with all applicable requirements of the code. The proposed use will be compatible with the character of the general vicinity and that surrounding homes also have ADUs. The proposed use will be served by public facilities and services, and the applicant, my parents, will install the public utilities, streets, or other public infrastructures as required by the village. As previously discussed about the detrimental impact to the community, this proposed use will not be detrimental. The proposed use will be for residential purposes. The proposed use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding property for uses permitted in the district, and the proposed use will not block sight lines from right-of-way to existing signs or windows on the front or side of a building. Furthermore, the conditional use application for a garage with ADU meets the specific standards set forth in Chapter 126208E. Additionally, I would just like to add that I am personally interested in this conditional use application for a garage with ADU. As I stated before, Johnny and Tracy are my parents, and as previously discussed with John and Melanie, the occupant of the ADU will be my brother, Adam. Adam is 37 years old, and he is in heart and kidney failure. Due to Adam's condition, he is unable to work. Adam cannot afford to live on his own, let alone afford the cost of living in Yellow Springs. By approving my parents' conditional use permit to build an ADU, not only would the addition greatly improve the property, but it would also enable my brother to have the opportunity to live in a community he loves and to do so with complete autonomy, which is very important to him, as you can imagine. Additionally, you would enable me and my parents to be close to him for support. And I respectfully request, based on some of the decision that has occurred during this meeting, that the decision that is made be made in accordance with the chapters as they are currently written and not speculative regarding future use, nor as to say legislating from the bench. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Anything else? I'm going to close the public hearing, and now it will be for the Planning Commission members to speak.
Hi, this is Jonathan Ricketts. I'd like to speak.
Okay, Jonathan.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm driving. I'm not able to really take notes. Kelsey presented a lot of information there. I just wanted to point out, we're not against the apartment. It's not the apartment we're against, and we don't want to have someone build an apartment with no windows. We understand that. It's really just the sense that the deck, and as I've heard, just this lingering aspect as compared to windows, I think is very valid. And yeah, I know the family can speak upon how their son is going to use the deck and all, but it's not their son speaking about how he's going to use the deck, and I would consider that speculative. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
I can address that as the attorney for my brother, that I thought would be an improper hearing for him to attend. So I can speak on his behalf and let you know how he intends to use
We are not going to engage in back and forth. This needs to go back to Planning Commission.
Okay, fair enough. And I would just like to reiterate my comment as to I'm respectfully requesting the decision be made in accordance with the chapters as they are currently written, as opposed to speculative use or in regards to things that are not specifically stated in those chapters, and that it be made in accordance with how those chapters are written.
Okay, anything else before I close the public hearing?
Susan, when you do close the public hearing, we have an issue here in that Matt Kirk has joined. And Matt, you were replaced by Gary Zaremski. I don't know if you got my email, but we need to have one of you needs to come off because we have too many Planning Commission members right now.
I will come off.
Thank you. I emailed you and I should have texted you.
Okay, we're closing the public hearing, and now it's up to the Planning Commission to discuss it. Denise, I do have a question. That we've talked about what the regulations are, and I know that this is a conditional use. So a conditional use, we can reject it, we can ask for changes, or we can approve it. What is your guidance in terms of the idea of changing the location, moving the accessory dwelling either to the east or to the north? Is that within our purview?
Well, since it's turned into this legal thing, I would defer to Brianne. I mean, obviously, to me, the neighbors do have an impact, and I think that as far as setbacks and size and those kinds of things, it meets the code requirements, but there can be conditions put on. I think that what Sarah tried to say was trying to find some sort of compromise that makes everyone be able to live next to each other and not have any problems. I thought it was valid, but at the end of the day, I think it really boils down to what Brianne's opinion is on that as our solicitor.
Brianne, could you give us your opinion?
I can give you my opinion, but as your legal counsel, I generally don't do that off the cuff. So What I will tell you is the same thing that I told you. If you impose conditions, you have to reference which sections of the code those conditions specifically are designed to address, as far as 126203, 126204, or 126208. You have to, as a planning commission, discuss and come to a decision as to which sections of the code in any conditions that you oppose apply. And if Denise tells you that the application as it stands meets all the requirements of the code, any decision you make, you should be wary of denying, because if you find that it does meet all of the applicable criteria for a conditional use permit for an accessory dwelling unit, and then you deny it, unless you find some other section of the code that applies as a basis for your denial, then that denial can be challenged as arbitrary and unreasonable. And the case law on that is actually a Village of Yellow Springs case from the 1980s in the 2nd District.
So, Susan, is there a way that this could be tabled? Because it does seem like there are some unresolved questions about whether the structure can be moved, and also what the actual property line is, and whether there isn't some kind of an architectural solution. Because I think it is very clear that the issue is not with the ADU, it is with the location of the deck. And it just seems like there's also a lot of unknowns going along with this. And, maybe if we could table it for a month, some of these could be cleared up. That the question of whether the structure could be moved closer to Cliff Street could be cleared up. The question of whether how big a architectural change is required, or whether the neighbors can agree that a ground level patio is a suitable, alternative. I mean, a lot of things have been brought up, and maybe there's some opportunities there.
Does somebody want to do that in the form of a motion?
I move that it be tabled.
You what?
I move that it be tabled.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
I think it would be important before you vote on that motion to find out whether tabling and moving this down the road is going to present any kind of obstruction or difficulty for the people making the request, because they do have all of their materials in a timely manner, and they do meet all the requirements for the conditional use. So what I am not hearing in terms of the discussion is whether Planning Commission believes that the deck and the use of the deck will present such a hardship or property value issue to the neighbor that should be what your decision surrounds, because you can certainly approve the ADU without a deck if in fact you believe that is the one sticking point. But I've heard from Johnny and from the property owner that they're not interested in moving the structure. So tabling it to see whether you can move the structure, I don't think is responsive to your applicant.
Okay, the reason I want to table it is I don't think this is right till somebody does a survey, because everybody's assuming they know where the boundary lines are, and they say, oh, well, it meets the setback requirement. Does it? Nobody really knows. So I think it needs to be surveyed and brought back, and I think the parties need to think about these concerns that have been raised and whether, and one thing I love about good design, and I'm so glad you're involved, Alex and Ted, is you can design around these concerns, and you're absolutely right that the more dense a village we have, the more privacy matters. I'd like to say density means privacy fences, because that's what people want. And it would be great if we could design, like have a design, instead of putting the balcony looking out over the neighbor's backyard, put it looking out over your own backyard, or a neutral area where there's not as many concerns. So that's my concern. I think this boundary issue needs to get resolved. Thank you.
I definitely agree with Laura. I definitely think we need to look at 126204C, which is protecting the natural resources, health, safety, welfare, social and economic well-being of those who will use the land or activities in consideration, residents, business owners, landowners, and immediate adjacent to the proposed use or activity in the community as a whole. I think maintaining the current habits, the current property values, and the privacy rights of existing properties when we're adding these new buildings and adding residents is extremely important. And we need to take that really to heart as we move forward so that there's not a negative attitude in this village about the growth. That we're invested in protecting what we already have and improving it, not taking away from other parties.
Okay. So the motion is to table it. And the reason is that we would like to have a survey so we really know where the property line is, and that we would like the neighbors to see if they can resolve their issue about the deck and the placement of it.
Well, I think the deck issue, I think the first stage is you clarify the property lines, because who knows, it might force some modification to the design anyway that you weren't even talking about. And it's hard to tell if that has an impact. Who knows what it means? And if it doesn't, then, then we have clarity on the only issue that is still being contested.
Okay.
I'm very concerned if there's no pegs there now, the property lines on GIS could be wildly off, is what I've seen in my experience. So I think that's very prudent that be resolved as a first step.
Okay, are we ready to vote? Judy, if you would do the roll call.
Yes. Green.
Yes.
Curlis.
Yes.
Amend.
Yes.
Zaremski.
Yes.
Stiles.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes.
Okay. Then I guess we're ready to move on to our next item on the agenda.
Can I just ask if Denise could have a moment to explain to the applicants what their next step will be, just in terms of contacting her, what they need to do next before?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right now, with the result of COVID, it's been really difficult, I know, for people to get surveys in a timely manner. But I don't know, John, with your background, that maybe you might be able to get a survey done much quicker.
ASAP, I'll get on that as soon as possible. And it's been great working with you. And I really do appreciate everybody's thoughtfulness and time tonight. And I just want to leave this. We want to be a part of the community. We want to be an asset to the community. And we're there to have our retirement and just to be the best neighbors possible. So wherever this goes, wherever this leads, that's not going to change in us. So thanks for taking the time. Denise, I'll contact you when I get that survey. Hopefully I can get it done in the next week or two, but then we will follow up I guess the next month's meeting then.
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Denise just has a question. Would the village mediator, is this a mediator that they could meet with in order to resolve the dispute between the neighbors in this kind of situation?
I was going to make that suggestion, and I think I'll wait until I talk to Johnny on the phone as a possibility too, where they can try to mediate that.
Yeah.
But that was a good suggestion.
Okay, we're ready to go on to the next, which are the amendments.
Yes.
To the zoning code. And so Denise, you want to talk about the first one?
Yes. Okay, so 1262 conditional use requirements. we talked about this previously, and really this is has a lot to do with COVID. And now we have materials that are people cannot get, construction materials. So we have an approval of a conditional use expires within 12 months unless construction's complete or the use has actually kicked in. They can come back for a 1-year extension, but we're finding lots of difficulties for applicants. We've had delays of 9 months or more just to get through building regulations before they even start construction. So what staff is proposing, and I think Laura, you brought this actually up at the last meeting, is that we give it 24 months after it is granted, and then if it's not complete, they could come back for a 12-month extension that would have to be approved by the Planning Commission.
Okay, is there any discussion?
This is Laura. I mean, I think for residential in particular, I mean, the materials and the construction trades are all backed up anyway for everybody. But, you know, residential folks, they're usually trying to balance kids and a job, and then on top of it all, trying to do an improvement project or something. So I'm all for it. I think 24 months is a lot more realistic. Thanks.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, we will open the public hearing. Are there any public comments? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. And do we have a motion to approve the amendment to Chapter 1262?
So moved.
I'll second.
A second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Judy, roll call?
Yes, Green,
Yes.
Amend,
Yes.
Stiles,
Yes.
Zaremski,
Yes.
Perlis.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, the next one is to amend Chapter 1268. Denise, do you want to talk about it?
Okay, and this is regarding transit guest lodging. At the council in May passed a couple of sections within the transit guest lodging. So you're going to see in there that for non-operator occupied permits, the zoning administrator should also send a copy to the Greene County auditor. That's already in there, as well as a minimum of 1 off-street parking space for 2 adult guests. That's already in there. But at our last meeting, we talked about a few more possibilities. I do want to point out under maximum occupancy, which we just talked about a little bit earlier, and where it says the maximum number of tenants permitted shall be determined by applicable health department requirements. It's not the health department. It seems to be the building regulations that does occupancy permits. And as Raven had mentioned, Miami Township Fire and Rescue also can say what the occupancy is for a dwelling. So I don't know if we want to make some sort of amendment to that, or if you'd be okay if staff finds out who it is, and then we can just insert that instead of health department. The other thing I had up under G was about a change in the ownership, taking out the allowance of renters. But what I didn't realize until staff had a meeting, because the transit guest lodging changes that have been made, especially to the tax ordinance, there's a lot more for staff to have to do. And we now don't call it an owner, but an operator. So one of the concerns is that if I go ahead and ask this to be changed, then every time an owner has an operator that's living on site and they may decide they don't want to do the job anymore and move away, and they go get another operator, then they would have to come back requesting another conditional use request to have this, which doesn't really make any sense. I think it should just stay and just leave it as it was. And that is that if what will kick in the requirement of a new transit guest lodging approval would be if the owner sells, then that makes the transit guest lodging void, and a new owner would have to apply for a transit guest lodging. And secondly, if the tenant actually is the one that applies and serves as the operator rather than an owner designating an operator, that then in that case, it would be void as well. So in other words, I'm saying I think we should just leave G alone. Even though I had suggested it and sent the report out, I'm now taking that back. So no change to that. The third one that we had talked about was.
So let me just clarify. So you're saying the 1268, that just to leave it, we're not going to make a change?
Well, no, the one section of it.
Okay.
So, Raven, can you scroll up a little bit on that? Here, G and H, leave them. I'm not we'll just leave it as it is written now. The change in the ownership of the property, or if the permit was submitted under a tenant's name and the tenant no longer resides at this address, will void the permit. And then if the applicant is not the property owner, a letter from the property owner agreeing to the use of their dwelling for a transient guest lodging is required. We'll just leave that.
Okay.
Because of the fact that we now call them operator occupied. Then under number, if you scroll back down, Raven, thanks, to M.
Did you want to talk about B?
About what?
About B. There's you skipped over about the.
Oh, sorry. I sure did. Yeah. Okay, so B, which is on the page above, Raven.
Give me 1 moment, please.
Okay. At the last meeting, Sarah, you brought up about proximity, and Brianne had said if you're going to base something on proximity, we need to kind of spell that out. So I just wrote in a sentence, but kind of need to fill that in as to if you want to do that. In no case can a transit guest lodging be located closer than blank feet from another transit guest lodging as measured from blank property line to blank property line. I don't know if you want to do it as the crow flies, or if you're going to do it going down a street, however you want to do that. Closest property line to the closest property line, and then how many feet.
Denise, have you seen this sort of thing in other zoning codes in other cities, like a dispersal kind of requirement to keep them from
No, I haven't seen it like this. Brianne has done some research too. Brianne, have you observed anything in any code about proximity?
I'm trying to recall which one I did see. I want to say it may have been Oxford, but don't hold me to that.
I know Xenia has it for bail bonds and tattoo parlors.
I mean, we have it.
There was another one.
We have it for sex shops, and I know for the marijuana, medical marijuana, the state required 500 feet from any church, school, or park.
but this is really getting at density, and is there have other municipalities tried to address the density?
Some of them have done it through caps on like a number per district, depending on the type of zoning district the TGL is located in. So we did do a review in 2019 when the changes were proposed. But since then, of course, more municipalities have adopted zoning codes addressing TGLs, and most of them are based on types of zoning districts and how many of these establishments would be permitted in any given district.
Is that workable for Yellow Springs? Do we have districts that can be used for that? And what would that, would it be, is it an absolute number or a percentage?
Well, I mean, we have.
We had a very lengthy discussion on that.
Okay.
When the legislation had, after Planning Commission had weighed in on what was the best mechanism as far as limiting the number and caps, and then it got to council, and as of right now, there's a de facto cap on non-operator occupied, in that they're not going to even come to Planning Commission. The only types that Planning Commission considers under the code changes that were passed are operator occupied establishments. So there's no number, but it in effect limits the TGL operations, has the same effect.
And when we wrote the code or tweaked it, we talked about its proximity to others and so it doesn't change the feeling of the neighborhood. And so we went to the trouble of actually creating, a transient guest lodging map, so you kind of see. But in the end, it's not been very effective in terms of proximity, because, I mean, how dense is how dense? I mean, when we just, Alex is actually still on the phone here, when we were dealing with the transit guest lodging over on North Walnut, there were like 4 of them within, a 2-block area. But we never really, is that too dense? Is that just fine?
Well, so could that be one of the reasons that we could deny an application? Like have it, so not maybe put a distance in there, but make it one of the things so that if we say that it's changing the character of the neighborhood, that we could deny the request?
See, I feel like that's a little bit too vague and could be seen as unfair. And so by giving it a firm definition of proximity, we're saying this is just the standard. We're not being biased. We're not doing favorites. This is just bias. And when I brought this up the last time, I took a measure of 10%. So for 2.7 square miles, are we okay with 10% of, kind of the variance? Obviously, because of the density of Yellow Springs, how it is already, I can kind of approximate that by that, because we're already dense. We don't have these different districts where we have these giant yards and then right on top of each other. Really, it's kind of stagnant. And so if I'm taking this, okay, if it's 10% of the additional, what we have already is going to be this transient, that's very generous. And that was just about where most of these are, which is about 500. It was 528 feet, linear feet. So that's right about that 500 feet that you normally see in the code, which is, either 500 or 1,000. But this way we're giving a firm definition there. It's very, very clear. We don't need to worry about us going back and forth and being swayed by presentations or framings or anything. This is a very black and white, fair way to address this, instead of it being so kind of washy with just the word proximity.
So if we put in 500 feet and we felt that there was somebody who was asking for a TGL that wasn't going to affect a neighborhood, but was closer than 500 feet, we could then still give them permission,
I think it'd be a variance.
a variance?
Is that right?
Yeah. Is that-
I don't know. Brianna, would that be a variance when?
Yeah, the problem is, as far as the variances, Board of Zoning Appeals can grant variances based on Duncan factors. And I don't know that the 500-foot restriction would qualify as something they could grant under Duncan factors.
But could Planning Commission?
Planning Commission does not have the authority to grant variances.
But I'm saying, so, but what, if somebody's like 490 feet from another property line and it doesn't seem to have any effect because of its location for some reason, Planning Commission can't grant that.
Yeah, Planning Commission's job is to apply the legislation to the application.
So 500 feet would be, because you have some lots that are 50 feet wide, some lots that are 100 feet wide. So that could be that you couldn't have, let's say if they were 50 feet wide, that you couldn't have one within, it'd have to be 10 houses down. Is that correct? And is that what we're comfortable with?
I mean, I see that as about a block. And so, I mean, I felt it was pretty generous.
Okay.
Yeah, what I wanted to point out, I had the same thought. So in the neighborhoods up north, yeah, it's 50-foot lots, could be 10, 11 houses. Then there's neighborhoods down in the south side of town that the front is well more than 100, 150 feet or so.
Yes.
You might have neighborhoods down there that every third house, is 500 feet from one another. So it's a tricky one, but you got to come up with a number. The reality, though, too, is the same way that we're talking about amending this document now. If you amend it now and you make a change, and in over a period of a couple of years or however long, you realize that this wasn't really a good number for such and such a reason, you could go back in and modify the document again. I mean, it's in a sense these are dynamic documents, and and this whole thing about transient guest lodging is sort of new. It's gotten dealt with suddenly, and I feel confident that there'll be periodic changes to how we regulate this over the next couple of years.
Well, I will say we've definitely been at the forefront on it, because a few years back when I meet with other zoning administrators in the Miami-Dade region, and I was, we were having issues with it. They hadn't even heard about it. I mean, it was like Airbnb just wasn't in the forefront of their minds. Well, it is now. I mean, it's just everywhere. Centerville, Kettering, everybody's dealing with it. So, I mean, now we're digging even further down into some of the issues that we're having. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think, I think 500 feet would be reasonable. I would want to measure it from the closest property line to the closest property line, and not have it be by street, just follow it by as the crow flies.
Closest property line.
That's the best way to do it. And I think it's important. I mean, this goes back to a lot of these, existing property, protecting, balancing the efforts that we have for growth and increased commerce by tourism, as well as the quality of life of existing residents. So it's a good step.
Could we deal with these one at a time? I have a motion on this section B.
Okay.
My motion is that in no case can a transient guest lodging, there's something blocking there we go, be located closer than 500 feet from another transient guest lodging as measured from the closest property line to the closest property line.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, let's vote on it then. Judy?
Yes. Sorry, give me a second. Amend.
Yes.
Green,
Yes.
Zaremski,
Yes.
Curlis,
Yes.
Stiles.
Yes. Okay, then,
So what did we decide again on C? Are you with applicable rather than health department or?
Why don't we just, I make a motion that we amend that section to reflect the entity with jurisdiction. And you can find out what that is.
Okay.
Is there the minimum of the entities? Because there might be, they might change this at some point where health department does say something and they might have more restrictive than the fire department.
Well, I think you could simply say, literally, amend it to the correct entity determine the requirements, because if it changes, you're still covered. And that way Denise goes to the correct entity to determine. I mean, would that work from Brianne's perspective?
I think you could just say health, safety, and welfare requirements. That covers health department and the fire department and the Ohio Board of Building Standards.
Okay, so that's my motion, applicable health, safety. Did you add another word? Health, safety.
And welfare requirements.
And welfare requirements.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Then let's vote on it.
All right, Zaremski. Zaremski? Okay, we've lost Lynn.
Yes.
Green,
Yes.
Curlis,
Yes.
Stiles.
Yes.
Zaremski, are you back with us? All right, that passes 4-0.
Okay. What do we need to pass now?
Okay, so G and H, that was just something I'd proposed, and now I'm not even bringing it up because I had already explained that, so there's no change to be made there. Going down to what is M, I'm going to have some formatting changes probably now. But we also had a designated outdoor smoking area to be located at least 15 feet from all property lines.
I make that motion.
And Judy, for clarification, do we need to have a public hearing on this? No, okay.
And do we want to add a designated outdoor smoking area if smoking is permitted?
Well, yeah.
I think that determines by the property owner if they permit it or not based on their contract that they have with the Airbnb person.
You don't need to go through these and make motions on all of the ones that are already reflected because they've already been so you can, once you've made motions on anything you need to add or change, then you can move to accept the entire section as amended and presented.
Okay, so you're saying that we could do N and O at the same time?
Am I correct, Brianne?
Yeah, they can do N and O together if there's not a big break or gap between the amendments, and they're considered together. They can make the motion for them to be considered together.
I have a question about N, or maybe more like a concern. When you say a designated outdoor smoking area, does that mean that we'd be requiring them to mark it somehow so that you know where it is? And then also a concern that in, these smaller lots up on the north side, they're 50 feet wide. You depending on where the house is positioned relative to property lines, there might not be an outdoor smoking area 15 feet from property lines if you consider also the roadway, So I'm actually a little bit concerned about, and in terms of how restricted it could be in certain circumstances.
I think this came up because there were complaints that guests were going to their property or in front of the neighbor's property to smoke because it wasn't permitted on the transient guest property. Is that correct, Judy?
Yes.
Yeah.
So here's something I just thought of, because it's the concern is more adjacent neighbor property, and if they went out into the street or into the driveway where the cars are, which might actually be village property because of often the roadways are way wider than what's paved. Presumably that'd be okay, right? And it might be your only choice. So I'm not sure how you would possibly reword that, but just say at least 15 feet from all property lines of adjacent occupied lots or parcels or something. Because actually, if the property, if the lot next door is an empty lot, it almost doesn't matter. I mean, I have an empty lot next to my house. They're scattered around town.
I think that's one where nobody would complain. It would, somebody adjacent might complain, and that was the issue.
Okay. But you need to add wording like that in this? Maybe not.
Are you just saying to go ahead and put just from all adjacent property lines?
Well, how about from all property lines of occupied adjacent lots? I mean, is that clearer? Would anybody think?
Well, I think the intention was to prevent people from going out into the street or the sidewalk or driveway to smoke. So they had to do that. They were able to do that on a property in a designated area, fairly distant from any other property.
Okay, yeah.
People can still say, we don't permit any smoking here, and we're not going to designate a smoking area because it's not permitted. And they can still go into the street and the sidewalk and the driveway because that's a public right of way. I mean, that's a public area. So I don't know. Planning commission will solve
I see
every
what you
problem
mean.
here.
Yeah. I see. I didn't. Sure.
Yeah, and it was my idea on the spur of the moment, and maybe it's not a great idea because
I think it gives them some direction. I think it gives them some direction to the property owner to at least try to tell their guests to go in a location if it is allowed. Which would help at least a portion of the properties. And if it helps a portion of these neighbors, and if people are going to go out in the streets and smoke, we can't do anything about it anyway. At least we've tried to mitigate some of the circumstances that might drive some complaints.
Yeah. So actually having language here that's not terribly precise might very well be the best way to do this from what various people have been describing now. So, okay.
Laura, would you like to include in your motion O?
I would. Now, I am not 100,
I'm losing
people.
something here. Where's O? I mean.
Yeah, I have N for the commercial insurance.
And under it then is O. MNO. Proof of commercial insurance.
Oh, okay.
No.
The paper
Okay,
document is different.
It's because Raven is ahead of us here and realized that we're not eliminating H. So she's correct. It's now N and O. Yeah.
Used to be.
Thanks,
N
Raven,
and
being on
N.
top of that. So
I don't know the answer to this question. Sometimes it's not possible to get commercial insurance, even though you're running it as a business. And I just don't, so on the enforcement side, Denise, if we pass this, it's possible people will say, my insurance company doesn't do that. I mean, I don't know the answer to that question.
So I brought this up, and I did speak to Perk Reichley as well, just about how his company's dealt with this. And I know when I used to own an independent insurance agency, I know how our company's dealt with it. And it is possible. The burden would be that if people, especially for non-owner occupied, neither one of us could figure out, knew a way that it wouldn't be underneath a commercial endorsement, even if it's a commercial endorsement on top of a homeowner's, because it's not owner occupied. There are companies that absolutely will do it. But the problem is if the owner doesn't do their due diligence and check with it, it's going to void the policy that's on the premises, and they're not going to have liability insurance, and they're not going to have property property insurance, which would obviously, if something were to happen and there'd be a fire, they would not be able to rebuild that property, which would be a huge detriment to that neighborhood.
So it's a good thing to require it.
It's a good thing to require it. It's making sure that they're aware of, hey, this is a big gate hole that if you don't tell anybody, you could have a big, big issue going forward. And it's, something that can easily be fixed.
And so if you're living on the property, then that's different. It can just go under your homeowners.
It's a lot more flexible. And, if it's not done you can do that at the next renewal, and it's a change of use. You can have up to 2 boarders and tenants in almost any homeowner's policy, a standard homeowner policy. When it's non-owner occupied, changes all of it.
Okay.
So I amend my motion to include O.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, Judy, could we have the vote?
Yes. Curlis.
Yes.
Amend.
Yes.
Green.
Yes.
Zaremski.
Yes.
Stiles.
Yes. Okay, do we have one more thing, Denise, or is that it?
We do. We have actually a couple more. We actually, I said I needed some time to see where all the effects of this change from 12 months to 24 months would be. And there's a lot of other sections in the code, but in discussing this with Brianne and staff, in light of the fact that we might be adding the building department, we're not bringing all of them forward right now. So what I do have left is under site plan review, which is 126809. Same as for the conditional use, just asking for 24 months instead of 12.
So
I'll make that motion.
A second.
Or I'll second.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, Judy, we're ready to vote.
Amend.
Yes.
Green.
Yes.
Zaremski.
Yes.
Curlis.
Yes.
Stiles.
Yes.
Thank you.
And lastly, under 1278, Board of Zoning Appeals, 127806, C, decisions of the board, every variance granted by the board shall lapse and be of no force or effect after 24 months instead of 12.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Judy, we're ready for the vote.
All right. Green.
Yes.
Curlis.
Yes.
Amend.
Yes.
Zaremski.
Yes.
Stiles.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else, Denise?
No.
Okay, we're on to old business. Is there any old business?
No.
Okay, new business.
Josue already ended up giving his update.
Okay.
During the other section of under council report, so nothing there.
And do we need anything under agenda planning?
Agenda planning, we've got definitely 314 Dayton Street, yay, it's finally coming. So that's gonna be great. For those of you that aren't aware yet, that that 314 Dayton Street was purchased by Dave Chappelle's company. And 314 Dayton Street, the proposal is to relocate WYSO to that building. And then it will also be administrative offices for Chappelle's business. We want to keep WYSO in Yellow Springs, and this was one way to do it. So I just actually got the renderings today. So that's one. And then the other one, 108 Cliff Street, which happens to be the location of the former lumber company. But I don't have those renderings yet and can't divulge yet what that is going to be. And that's it.
Are we bringing back 213 North Winter? You tabled it.
Yes, 214.
Yeah, if it's ready. Yeah.
I think Mr. Cooley, he works in the construction industry. I bet he can probably get that survey done.
Great.
He can find somebody to do that pretty quickly. So yes, we'll bring that back in July. Coming up in the future, not July, but coming up, will be some amendments to the code for building department. We'll somewhere down the road here, probably August, September, we might have the Ober major subdivision coming to us, and Homey will be coming back with the PUD for the 54 units. That has to be a complete reapproval because they had one extension and that expired now, so they have to come back for the whole thing again. They won't have to go back for the rezoning, but it'll have to be a preliminary approval by Planning Commission and then also by council. But that's down the road.
Okay, anything else? Are we ready to adjourn? Okay, can I just say we are adjourned, or do we need to vote on it?
You just say, I move to adjourn, somebody will second, and then it's just a quick voice vote.
Okay, I move to adjourn.
Second.
I'll second.
And we all agree we're adjourned? Say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Susan, for sharing this.
Thank you,
It's
Susan.
been a long time since you've had to do that. You did a great job.
Oh,
Thanks, everyone.
All right,
Bye.
thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
And next time it'll be in person.
Oh, yeah.